She was her adoptive parents' pride and joy.
They'd do whatever they could to make me the happiest child.
They tried to give her everything. They adored her.
Their joy and adoration ended, however, when a star-crossed relationship came between daughter and parents.
It was her first relationship where she'd been involved in sexual activity.
They disliked me being with him. They saw it as bringing me down.
But just as their fears appeared to be confirmed,
Mom took her to the drugstore and got a pregnancy test.
their little girl would sink much, much lower.
911, do you have an emergency?
I just killed my mother.
May 14, 1997, Coral Springs, Florida. At 7:07 p.m., an Area 911 dispatcher received a chilling call.
Oh my God! Get the cops out here now! Okay, they're coming.
She's trapped, I can't help her. I was in shock, just like trying to absorb the reality of the whole situation.
And the reality of the situation was shocking, to say the least. The dead woman was Nikki's own mother. And according to what Nikki told the 911 dispatcher, she had died at her daughter's hands.
How did you do that?
Repeatedly, there's blood over her and all over the floor and everything.
You could hear in her voice the terror, almost as if somebody else had done this.
But when the first officer arrived on the scene minutes later, Nikki took full responsibility for the crime.
I was screaming, telling them to come and arrest me.
For a young female juvenile to commit a homicide, that's a rare thing.
The search for answers would lead deep into the mind of a troubled teen.
She says, I can't believe I'm so obsessed with a boy that I would do something like this.
I used to be like really religious and everything, and I used to live a really Christian life until I got involved with Carlos.
And Nikki's fate would hinge on the question of what mattered more: nurture.
They absolutely loved her to death, and I guess they felt she would reciprocate.
Or nature.
Mental illnesses have a strong genetic, predisposition.
Born in 1979, Jacqueline Nikki Reynolds had been 3 months old when her birth mother gave her up for adoption.
I didn't even know I was adopted until I was old enough to start asking questions.
Not that Nikki's adoptive parents, Robert and Billie Jean Reynolds, hid anything from their daughter.
My mom said that if I was ever ready, when I would turn 18 and wanted to find out who my biological mom was, and she would not keep that a secret from me.
They were a wonderful couple. They were wonderful parents. She was just their little girl that they adored.
A deeply religious couple, Robert Reynolds worked for the Florida Department of Transportation, while Billie Jean was an administrative assistant with R.J. Reynolds. From the very beginning, they did all they could to move heaven and earth for their beloved daughter.
They tried to give her everything. They were a church-going family. They adored her, and they treated her the way parents should treat a child.
It was probably a fairy tale lifestyle that I had as a kid. Very loving, never judgmental, never harsh on me.
Growing up in sunny South Florida, Nikki's bond with her parents only deepened over the years.
We'd go to the mall on Fridays, or I'd go to have ice cream with my dad and baseball games with my dad and go shopping with my mom. They'd do whatever they could to make me the happiest child, which I was.
There was one thing Nikki's parents didn't do, however.
She was never told no. She was a spoiled brat. There's just no getting around that at all.
Spoiled or not, by the time Nikki entered her sophomore year of high school in 1995, the Reynolds' approach to parenting appeared to have paid off.
I always had good grades, went to after-school programs, was very involved with the church.
Between church, school, and extracurricular activities, Nikki Reynolds had grown into a well-rounded teenager. But she was no longer Robert and Billie Jean's baby girl.
I started to be more interested in boys.
Boys also began to take more of an interest in Nikki, which in the spring of 1996 led to trouble. It was late one afternoon in March when neighbor Patty Gertz noticed a police car outside the Reynolds house.
And I had questioned Billy about it, and she had stated that Nikki had said that she had been raped.
According to Billie Jean, Nikki claimed she'd been assaulted that day after stepping off her school bus. But once the police were involved, her story had changed.
First it was somebody she knew, then it was somebody she didn't know.
Finally, Nikki ended up denying the entire allegation.
There was no rape. She'd made it up.
Why had she lied? According to Nikki, the truth was she had a new boyfriend, her first in one regard.
He was just my first person sexual-wise, so he brought me into a whole new world of emotions that I was unaware of. He was my world at that time.
Afraid she was pregnant, Nikki told police she'd cooked up the rape story to protect her boyfriend and her parents.
I didn't want to hurt them, being raised up in a church family, and I didn't want them to think that they had did anything wrong or raised me wrong.
Nikki wasn't pregnant, but to her church-going mother, that was little consolation for the news that her 16-year-old was sexually active.
That was really upsetting to Billy.
She was very angry with me. I basically threw my morals aside.
And just whom Billie Jean wanted to know had her daughter sacrificed her principles for. According to Nikki, he was a 16-year-old classmate named Carlos Infante.
I was in American history class with him, and we started by just hanging out in that class, getting to know each other, and then one thing led to another.
Had Carlos led Nikki astray? Her parents seemed to think so.
They disliked me being with him. They saw it as bringing me down.
Determined to get Nikki back on the straight and narrow, Billie Jean insisted she spend less time with Carlos and more time at church.
She thought the good kids were there at the church, that this would probably be a good influence on her to get in with a better group of kids.
But the more Billie Jean dragged her daughter to church, the more Nikki resisted.
I knew that the way I was living and everything was not right in God's eyes, but I didn't really want to hear all that.
Nikki also started to skip class. Soon her grades plummeted. By her junior year in high school, Robert and Billie Jean barely recognized the person their daughter had become.
Something just went wrong. You have a great kid, soft-spoken, seemed to me happy-go-lucky, and then she was making the bedroom dark, changing her music that she listened to. Just everything was opposite of what Nikki normally was.
I slept a lot, stayed in my room a lot, did not go out with the family. Nothing really held my interest.
Nothing, that is, but Carlos Infante.
After I became sexually involved with Carlos, my intensity level with him became like an obsession. Everything revolved around Carlos. I had pictures of him everywhere in the room. Every waking minute had to do with Carlos.
And she filled her diary with everything from confessions to poetry, all about Carlos.
She was in a situation where it was her first relationship where she'd been involved in sexual activity with anybody. So as a result of that, she, during that period of time, began to display behaviors she didn't display before.
Robert and Billie Jean were troubled by Nikki's new behavior and her new boyfriend.
I think they acted like any parent that loves their child and sees their child failing in their grades and in their classes. They were concerned.
Billy had said that, he wasn't making good grades, he wasn't a good influence on Nikki, and she was worried that he was coming over every day.
Billie Jean did more than just worry. After years of permissive parenting, she suddenly started telling her daughter no. And Nikki took her mother's new approach more like a toddler than a teenager.
Nikki would go off on these tantrums, these screaming, yelling, like fits.
It was very wearing on Billy, and she just about had it, and she said she found herself screaming at Nikki all the time.
Billie Jean screamed in vain. Nikki remained determined to see Carlos, no matter what.
She would sneak out of her room at night when everybody went to sleep.
And the more her daughter disobeyed, the more exasperated Billie Jean became.
Billie Jean told me, don't be surprised one day if you come home and there's police cars and fire trucks up and down the street, because I don't know if it's going to be me or Nikki, but one of us is going to be gone.
On May 14, 1997, Billie Jean received a phone call from the counselor at Nikki's high school. There was trouble with Nikki and Carlos.
The school counselor got involved with it, and the school counselor called Mom.
The meeting Billie Jean had with the school counselor that afternoon was brief, just long enough for the counselor to request that Billie Jean, Robert, and Nikki come in for a full session the following morning. The counselor explained that Nikki and Carlos had more than just the typical high school trouble to worry about. Nikki had confessed to the counselor that she was pregnant with Carlos's baby. Of course, considering Nikki had already lied about being raped, Billie Jean had reason to doubt her daughter's pregnancy. And there was a surefire way to find out.
Mom took her to the drugstore. They went and got a pregnancy test.
The test was negative, but the news didn't do much to soften Billie Jean's disappointment.
She was very upset, crying a lot. She was very angry with me.
While her mother raged, Nikki placed a call to Carlos to tell him the news.
I had decided to do that on my own, for one, wanting to see his reaction.
But she hadn't been on the phone long when her mother interrupted. Even though they had an appointment with the school counselor the next morning, Billie Jean wanted to consult a higher power.
Billie was adamant about her seeing the church counselor.
Billie Jean drove Nikki to the church. There, while mother and daughter waited to see the counselor, Nikki had a few brief words with her pastor, Herschel Kreisman.
She was having some boyfriend problems. I was there to be supportive to her.
The counseling session that followed wasn't so supportive, however.
The counselor, she started to raise her voice and tell me that my mom didn't deserve this, and it offended me. I got up, removed myself from her office, went outside into the parking lot, even contemplating running away at that time.
But Nikki didn't run away. Instead, she went back upstairs to the counselor's office and apologized to her mother. But was it the end of the fight? Or had she decided to take a new approach? At 7:07 p.m. on the evening of May 14th, barely an hour after returning home from her short session with the church counselor, Nikki Reynolds picked up the phone and dialed 911.
When do you have an emergency? I just killed my mother. You just killed your mother? Yes, I did.
When police arrived moments later, they found Nikki waiting on her doorstep.
She had blood all over her, blood on her legs, blood on her face.
Coming up, in the interrogation room, Nikki reveals the disturbing truth behind her mother's death.
I told her everything. I'm like, I'm sorry. I have to kill you.
At just after 7 p.m. on May 14, 1997, Coral Springs police and EMT vehicles were lined up outside the home of 17-year-old Nikki Reynolds. Minutes earlier, the teen had dialed 911 and confessed to committing a crime of unimaginable horror.
I stabbed her repeatedly in the back. There's blood over her and all over the floor.
A teenage girl confessing to stabbing someone over and over was shocking enough. But what most astounded investigators was the identity of her victim.
She had killed her mother. I don't know anybody that just can fathom killing their own mother.
Nikki was handcuffed and put into the back of a police car.
The police officer at the scene had turned on a tape recorder and left it on the seat. She had been taped talking to herself.
I was praying the entire time I was in that cop car.
Oh, God. Please be alive. Please. Please, 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 please. Oh, please be alive, God. I've learned my lesson so bad.
And Nikki was still praying moments later when the paramedics arrived.
I remember seeing them bring her out on a stretcher with the IV attached to her, and I remember thinking in my head, okay, she's not covered up. And I remember actually feeling a lot of hope.
Nikki's hopes and prayers were no use. Stabbed 13 times, Billie Jean Reynolds was pronounced dead at 8:10 p.m.
She died by bleeding to death because there were so many stab wounds.
Nikki was transported to the Coral Springs Police Department. Moments later, her father arrived home from church to find his house surrounded by police cars and crime scene tape.
The father just completely broke down and collapsed right there on the street. He couldn't believe that his wife was gone. And he couldn't believe that his daughter did this.
And this homicide had been particularly brutal, if the scene inside the house was any indication.
There was blood all over the place inside the house.
The mother tried to get away from her. It was just a trail of blood.
There had been no escape. The blood trail traced Billie Jean Reynolds' harrowing death, dragging herself across the floor as she was stabbed again and again.
A knife was in the sink. It was like a kitchen knife and had some blood on it.
In the kitchen, not far from where they'd found the knife, police found evidence that someone had attempted to clean up the crime scene.
On the countertop, there was a couple bloody towels and dish rags that looked like somebody had been smearing, trying to wipe blood up off the floor.
While police worked the crime scene, detectives at the Coral Springs Police Department questioned Nikki about the murder, and they didn't have to press too hard for answers.
I had no intentions of lying. I didn't have any secrets. I wanted to get it out.
It was so simple because she just chatted away. All I had to ask her was, Nikki, what happened today? Can you describe to me what happened? And she just went through the whole story from A to B.
It was a story that, according to Nikki, centered on her boyfriend, Carlos Infante. Nikki said it all began that afternoon when the school counselor called her mother.
Mom came there to the school. That's when Mom found out that she was pregnant.
At least that's what Nikki had told Carlos.
There would be times when Carlos would break up with me, and I would claim to be pregnant, and he would stay with me. I lied to him, so then I figured I couldn't live without him.
But that afternoon, she'd called Carlos from home and told him the truth. There was no baby.
That's when he got all mad at me. He did not want anything to do with me anymore because of all the lies.
Then, according to Nikki, an extraordinary thing happened. Billie Jean Reynolds had gotten on the phone with Carlos.
She apologized to him for having me put him through all the stuff I put him through.
For his part, Carlos had made it clear that he was only angry with Nikki, not Billie Jean.
He was apologizing to her for all the drama and everything.
But the drama had been far from over. Nikki told police that after she got off the phone with Carlos, she had decided to kill someone.
I took a glass jar full of cotton balls, emptied out the cotton balls, filled it with water, and took out an aspirin bottle out of my parents' medicine cabinet and started to shove as many pills as I could in my hand and just kept swallowing it.
Expecting death at any moment, she'd accompanied her mother to the counseling session at Coral Springs Baptist Church.
When she took me to see the lady for the first time, I had already overdosed and thought that I was going to be dead that day.
But when the overdose seemed to have no effect, Nikki told detectives that her thoughts turned from suicide to homicide. But the intended victim wasn't her mother.
The thoughts started changing that if I get to school to Carlos the very next day, then I can most likely kill him. If I couldn't have him, no one could. Well, my plan to kill Carlos was to wait till he comes out of his first shower, come up behind him, and slit his throat.
There was, as Nikki told the detectives, one obstacle in the way: the meeting with her high school guidance counselor.
I was thinking, well, I don't know how I'm going to do this because I don't know after the meeting if they're going to say, well, take your daughter home.
To kill Carlos as planned, Nikki would have to skip the guidance meeting. But how?
I figured, well, I'll just wait till my parents are sleeping and then I'll slash their throats.
But the plan changed when her father left for church after supper that night, alone.
Her father was at church. Her mother decided not to go on that particular evening.
And Nikki wasn't going anywhere either.
My mom told me I was grounded for the rest of the night. She told me to just clean up the dishes.
According to Nikki, as she stood over the sink that night, she'd started plotting.
I started cleaning the dishes, and from there, the thoughts started changing. I figured this even makes it easier for me if I kill my mom and then clean up the mess and wait till my dad gets home. Then I'll kill him, and then I'll drive to school tomorrow, and then I'll kill Carlos. All logical thinking was out the door at this time. Whatever thought went through my head, that's what I acted on, not thinking of consequences.
The plan laid out. All she needed was opportunity. It had come, according to Nikki, not long after she finished the dishes.
I was acting up like I was cleaning the kitchen. My mom started working at the computer. It was what I tried.
In gory detail, Nikki walked the detectives through what had happened next.
She said she went to the kitchen, she pulled out a kitchen knife and she rubbed it along her finger to feel if it was sharp enough to do the job.
According to what Nikki told police, she hesitated once she had the knife in hand.
And the only time it started scaring me was when I was actually thinking about when I was cleaning up the kitchen to kill my mom, and I had the knife, I was shaking, everything like that. I didn't know what to do.
Her hesitation didn't last long.
I finally got the nerve to come up behind her, and I tried to slash her throat. And it didn't exactly cut. She started screaming, and she jumped up towards the laundry room. She's like, "No, Nikki, no."
That's when, according to Nikki, she struck.
I kept stabbing her and everything like that, and I told her, "I'm sorry, I have to kill you because I can't live without Carlos." I asked her why I was doing this. I asked her to help me stop, and I could not. I felt like I was watching it other than doing it.
But if she wanted to stop, why did she continue to stab her mother?
The thoughts that kept going through my head were, if you stop now, she's going to suffer. And if you love her, why would you let her suffer? Why wouldn't you hurry up and send her to God? I kept asking her, "Are you dying? Are you dying?" And I was crying because I felt so bad. I couldn't believe what I was doing.
You were asking her, what?
Are you dying? Are you dying?
Eventually, Billie Jean ceased to struggle.
Her mother says the life is going out of me, and she said I stabbed her 3 or 4 more times until she stopped moving.
But, Nikki told detectives, Billie Jean offered her daughter forgiveness, even as she lay dying.
The last thing that really stands out to me is that she said that she just wanted me to get help, and that she did love me.
Her mother's dying words, she explained to police, finally made her realize what she'd just done. And as the awful impact sank in, she'd panicked.
I felt in my mind that I can erase it. So I had attempted to basically start cleaning up the mess.
There was, however, one thing she couldn't erase, no matter how hard she tried.
When I had turned and saw her lying on the floor, it just felt like a huge smack in the face of almost like an awakening of reality. And immediately I picked up the phone.
911, do you have an emergency? I just killed my mother.
The confession caught on 911 tape was damning enough, even without the chilling details added by Nikki's interrogation.
It really kind of spoke for itself, the confession.
And although Nikki had just confessed to murder, her next confession would keep her from spending that night behind bars.
During the interview, Nikki said that she had ingested some aspirin, and I guess in an attempt to commit suicide.
I was very sick being from the pills, started throwing up, and then they took me from there to the emergency room.
But Nikki's short hospital stint didn't mean she was off the hook.
I was at the hospital with her for quite a while, stood post by her until the doctors would release her to go to the county jail.
Later that night, Nikki was formally booked on first-degree murder charges.
It's almost like Monopoly, you know, go directly to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200.
Coming up, could Nikki's suicide attempt amount to a get-out-of-jail-free card?
Aspirin has a significant potential for causing metabolic derangement.
The defendant stops and then says, "Are you dying yet? Are you dying yet?" And her mother says, "Yes, I feel the life fading out of me."
If convicted of the crime, Nikki faced life in prison. But why would the baby-faced teen commit such a heinous act? The answer, according to the prosecutor's opening statement, centered around a boy named Carlos Infante.
She just wanted to be with him, that's all there was to it.
That didn't mean he'd been involved, however. The prosecution pointed out that Carlos not only had an alibi, he was also one of the 3 people Nikki had set out to kill on the night of May 14th, 1997.
She had it all planned out. Mom was first, and she was going to go on to Dad next, and then her boyfriend.
In their open, Nikki's defense team didn't dispute the state's charge that their client had committed the crime, but they argued that Nikki was innocent by reason of insanity.
Insanity made perfect sense to me because of how I felt, being that I couldn't believe it happened.
It seemed pretty clear that Nikki had done something that was quite out of character for her. It did seem to me as though there was a really strong case for insanity.
But was the case strong enough for Nikki to escape life in prison?
The definition of insanity is very strict. You have to suffer from a major mental disorder, and you have to not know that what you were doing was wrong, not know the consequences of it, not know the nature of it.
Did Nikki know what she was doing when she plunged a knife into her mother 13 times? The answer, according to the psychologist who testified for the prosecution, was yes.
She was a confused girl, very conflicted, had some personality problems, but under the definition of the law, she did not meet the legal criteria for insanity.
Nikki, according to the prosecution, had knowingly committed murder. The proof, they claimed, was in the statement she gave to police just hours after killing her mother. On April 15th, prosecutors called the detectives who'd taken Nikki's statement to the stand.
Nikki Reynolds knew exactly what she was doing. I always thought it was premeditated because she thought about how she was going to do it.
Jurors didn't have to take the detective's word for it either. Nikki's entire interrogation had been captured on tape.
I figured this even makes it easier for me if I kill my mom and then clean up the mess and wait till my dad gets home. Then I'll kill him, and then I'll drive to school tomorrow, and then I'll kill Carlos.
She walked her way through the whole incident, her plans on how she did it.
And the planning, according to the prosecution, started hours before Billie Jean's death. As proof, prosecutors called Nikki's pastor, Herschel Kreisman, to testify.
The pastor testified that he had spoken with Nikki several hours before the murder.
They'd spoken on the afternoon of May 14th, 1997, when Billie Jean brought her daughter in to see the church counselor.
She asked him, "Can I still go to heaven if I've done something bad?"
Had it been a veiled reference to the horrible crime Nikki was hours away from committing? Not according to Nikki's defense attorney. He argued that there was a perfectly rational answer for his client's statement.
I felt like I was going to die from the overdose.
And the same religious upbringing that led Nikki to consider suicide a mortal sin was front and center when the defense started presenting its case on April 26th.
The rest of her life wasn't spent stabbing people, hitting people with sticks, running around with guns.
Nikki was a sweet girl, very soft-spoken, very quiet, always smiling, saying hello. Before Billy was killed, something happened. Something snapped.
But what had caused Nikki's sudden change from a good girl to a killer? Her defense team argued that underneath Nikki's sweet exterior was a mental illness that had finally surfaced with tragic results.
The defense was trying to show that she could not appreciate the wrongness of what she was doing.
I couldn't understand, even though I had committed a violent crime. I still want to sit here and say I'm not this violent person. I don't understand it just as much as anybody else doesn't understand it.
To bolster their case, Nikki's defense attorney called in psychiatric experts to testify that Nikki suffered from borderline personality disorder.
Individuals with borderline personality disorders can adore and idealize the person that they're with and then very quickly snap into one of feeling rejected and overwhelmed with extreme rage and anger.
Could Nikki's breakup with Carlos Infante have sent her spiraling out of control?
They certainly were presenting that she had snapped at the time, that something had happened to her that caused her to do something temporarily that she would not ordinarily have done.
It all has to do biologically with what I struggle with mental illnesses, borderline personality disorder.
At the time of the actual event, I do not believe that her brain was functioning normally.
But Nikki's personality disorder wasn't all the defense claimed as the cause of Billie Jean's death. There was also the aspirin.
Aspirin has a significant potential for causing metabolic derangements within the body. The overdose of the aspirin caused her to have a mini psychotic episode.
Under what her attorneys claimed was the aspirin's mind-altering influence, Nikki may have planned out a series of murders. But the defense also reminded jurors that it was the horrible aftermath of the first killing that had shocked the teenager to her senses.
She got snapped back to reality when she saw her mother's body.
That's what the defense claimed, at least. But on April 29th, it would be up to the jury to decide not whether or not Nikki committed murder, but whether her alleged insanity was enough to excuse it.
Nobody was denying what took place here. Nobody was denying how horrific it was. Her sanity was the only issue that was at stake.
Coming up, the jury retires to consider a verdict. But would its decision mark the end of this case, or just the beginning?
Do you acknowledge being the biological mother of the defendant in this case, Jacqueline Nicole Reynolds?
Yes, I am.
On May 3rd, 1999, 19-year-old Nikki Reynolds sat in a Broward County courtroom facing an uncertain future. Charged with the first-degree murder of her adoptive mother, her only chance to avoid a lengthy prison sentence rested on one thing.
The central question wasn't whether or not she did it. The central question was whether or not she was sane when she did it.
Nikki's defense attorney had argued that his client wasn't. But would a jury agree?
That's a very difficult thing for a juror who's a layman to be able to say, well, can somebody so disassociate themselves that they don't know right from wrong?
Just how difficult became clear on May 3rd when jurors sent a note to the presiding judge. They were hopelessly deadlocked, 6 in favor and 6 against a conviction.
The judge asked them to go back in and make a decision once again.
It was no use.
You had 2 mental health professionals on the defense saying she was insane, and 2 doctors for the state saying she was not insane. What the jury did was they compared the 2 and said, we need a tiebreaker.
The showdown came 6 months later, when both sides reconvened for a second trial in the same Florida courtroom on November 1st, 1999. As they had in the first trial, prosecutors contended that Nikki Reynolds fully intended to kill her mother when she'd picked up the knife on the evening of May 14th, 1997.
That's a day that when the voice of Billie Jean Reynolds was silenced prematurely, but forever silenced. Her voice was silenced by none other than her daughter, Jacqueline Nicole Reynolds.
Next, hoping to defuse Nikki's insanity defense, prosecutors once again called a series of psychologists to the stand. And each expert repeated the previous argument that while hardly a rational act, killing her mother didn't automatically prove Nikki was insane.
In this case, you have an individual who clearly showed her ability to discriminate wrongfulness by looking at the situation, thinking about it, and even testing ahead of time the knife to see whether or not it was sharp enough.
She knew what she was doing. She knew she was stabbing her mother. She knew that she was killing her mother, and she knew that that was wrong.
And Nikki, according to prosecutors, did more than just weigh right and wrong before picking up the knife. They claimed her mother's death was clearly premeditated.
It wasn't a rash, impulsive behavior where her and her mother get into an argument. She's so upset she just pulls out a knife and starts to stab her. I mean, she planned the timing of it, and she planned what was going to happen after it.
As in the first trial, the defense countered by arguing that Nikki was indeed mentally ill. And like the prosecution, the defense called experts to testify as to Nikki's sanity or lack of it.
We don't even know whether she fully understood when she was attacking this person, whether in her mind this person was really her loving mother, or whether this person was now the enemy.
In my head, it basically told me if you kill your mom, then you can still get to Carlos, not thinking this is my mom that loves me and wants
murder.
Her mother testified that during her pregnancy, she repeatedly tried to induce a miscarriage. She punched herself in the stomach. She fell on her stomach. She was trying to lose this baby.
Nikki appeared shaken by the news.
Nikki was fighting back tears when her mother was testifying about her efforts to get rid of Nikki when she was pregnant with her.
Did the same mental illness that drove Nikki's birth mother to try to abort her unborn child lead to Billie Jean's death?
To understand what type of illness someone may have, you just have to shake the family tree and see what falls out.
The mother did have similar psychiatric issues as those that Nikki had.
It's all the same line of behaviors, and that was important for our defense.
And according to that defense, it was the anxiety over losing Carlos that pushed Nikki's borderline personality disorder into psychosis.
At the time of the crime, she had lost touch with reality and she was experiencing problems with her thinking. She thought that she had to kill her mother and her father because they were going to prevent her from killing Carlos the next day at school.
Why did you find that to be evidence, if you did, of psychosis or psychotic-like features?
Because it doesn't really make any long-term sense. It's not necessary for her to kill her parents in order to kill Carlos, as crazy as killing Carlos is.
But did that prove Nikki was truly insane? The prosecutors didn't think so. In their closing arguments on November 17th, they hammered that point home by playing Nikki's own words from her 911 tape.
I can't believe I did this to her. Okay, Nikki, everything's going to be okay, all right? It is not. I'm going to see the electric chair.
She was confused. She wasn't thinking logically, but she wasn't irrational.
In fact, mere hours after the killing, during her interrogation, Nikki was rational enough to start offering up excuses. It was the same excuse prosecutors reminded the jury that her attorneys had spent the last several days presenting.
This has never happened before. That's why I think I need to. I don't know. What do they do when you plead insanity?
Coming up, will her biological mother's history convince jurors that Nikki also suffered from mental illness? Or will they see Nikki's insanity plea as a cold, calculated act? On November 19, 1999, 20-year-old Nikki Reynolds sat in a Fort Lauderdale, Florida courtroom awaiting a verdict in her second murder trial.
The thoughts that kept going through my head waiting for the verdict was basically trusting in the Lord and knowing it was in His hands.
One jury had already tried and failed to reach a verdict. Would a second?
Mr. Foreperson, have you arrived at a verdict?
Yes, sir, we have.
The trial offered jurors a choice between two mothers. The biological one the defense claimed had passed her mental illness on to her daughter, and the one who'd adopted Nikki as an infant. Could one cancel out the other? And if so, which?
We, the jury, finds as follows as to the indictment of this defendant in this case. Defendant is guilty of the lesser included crime of murder in the second degree.
To find somebody guilty of second-degree murder, there has to be ill will or like hatred towards the victim. And I remember my reaction being very upset when I was found guilty. There's no evidence of hate towards my mother or that I wanted her dead. There's no evidence of that.
At her sentencing hearing on January 7, 2000, Nikki's biological mother, Katrina Ramos, made a passionate plea on behalf of her 20-year-old daughter.
I am asking you to consider treatment as a part of Nikki's sentencing. I believe that Nikki can turn her life around as well and be a productive member of society.
Then, for the very first time, Nikki addressed the court.
I don't know what happened that day. I didn't mean to hurt any of you. And whether you believe me or not, I swear to God, I didn't mean to hurt her. I didn't mean to tear the family apart.
I made a statement asking them to forgive me and understand that I did not mean this and I did not hate my mom or any of my family for that matter, not even Carlos.
Next, Nikki begged the judge to sentence her to a psychiatric hospital in lieu of prison.
Things like this don't just happen, and I believe that there's something has to be wrong. And if it was not insanity, something was wrong that day.
Although the way the judge saw it, the horrible wrong Nikki had committed outweighed all else. That afternoon, he gave Nikki the maximum sentence under Florida law, 34 years in prison.
A child who could have had a nice full life and enjoyed her life with her family now will always look back and realize she's got a shattered family.
And for Nikki, losing her family, not losing Carlos, was the ultimate price.
These are the consequences of my crime. I just want people to learn from my experience, teenagers and maybe other kids that struggle with codependency or feeling like their boyfriend is their life and they can't go on, that of course that's not true.
A prison nurse falls in love with a smooth-talking felon.
For Jennifer Hyatt, George Hyatt was Prince Charming.
She was like a teenage girl in love with an older boy.
But when her soulmate turned abusive, the nurse became the prisoner, trapped in a bizarre relationship she couldn't break out of.
He would call me 24 hours a day. I had to sleep with the phone in my ear.
You could see him ratcheting up the pressure on her.
And the pressure would eventually push a desperate woman to do the unthinkable.
I had the gun in my hand, and the gun went off. And they shot him. Point blank.
On the morning of August 9, 2005, Jennifer Hyatt walked out of the Roane County Courthouse in Kingston, Tennessee, and got behind the wheel of her Ford Explorer. Her husband, incarcerated felon George Hyatt, had just pled guilty to an outstanding burglary charge, adding years to his already lengthy sentence.
He's just not going to get out anytime soon. He had no future ahead of him.
Jennifer and George had been married for less than 3 months. They'd never spent a moment alone as man and wife. Now it looked like they might never be together. But would that necessarily be a bad thing?
I think Jennifer was scared and in love all at the same time.
George tormented Jennifer, allegedly harassing her day and night over the phone and tracking her every move.
I had people watching me. He knew everything I did.
She did try to commit suicide because of the way he was treating her.
Now, on the morning of August 9th, Jennifer was prepared to do something even more drastic.
She was just vulnerable enough to believe that it was the only thing that she could do to save her own life.
At approximately 10 a.m., 2 prison guards were loading George into a prison van when Jennifer leveled a handgun at the 3 men.
They was trying to push George on into the van, and he hollered, "Shoot him."
But would she do her sadistic lover's bidding or end his abuse forever? George wasn't always Jennifer's torturer. In fact, at the beginning of their relationship, he was her protector. They met in 2004 at Tennessee's Northwest Community Correction Complex, where Jennifer worked as a nurse. It was her first job out of nursing school.
She decided to go into this nursing because she just enjoyed it, and I was very proud of her turning her life around.
Jennifer had arrived in Tennessee 3 years earlier. Originally from outside Salt Lake City, she'd fled Utah in an effort to escape from her first husband.
He got into the drugs. He went to crank and then to meth. And he got really bad on the meth.
And when her husband went to jail on drug charges in 1999, Jennifer filed for divorce and started over.
She wanted to just get the kids away from that whole scene.
And so when she took the kids, she just went to Tennessee.
Settling in near friends in West Tennessee, the mother of 3 remarried and enrolled in a nursing program. As part of the program, Jennifer did a clinical rotation at a nearby prison. And she did more than just work in the hospital ward. The prison put Jennifer to work with its close security inmates.
They couldn't come out, like to Medline. They couldn't come out to get bandage changes and stuff. I had to go to the units and do this. So I was one-on-one all the time with them.
A guard always accompanied her. But for many of the inmates, it was as close to being alone with a woman as they could get.
She was getting harassed by a lot of the male prisoners.
There was a few that would always show themselves to me.
With the guard present, Jennifer wasn't in any real danger, but she soon became fed up with the constant flashing and lewd talk.
After a while, you're just like, okay, enough. You're men. Grow up.
One day, Jennifer recounts, a guard offered her a possible solution.
He's like, well, I know somebody here that could walk you around the different units and kind of protect you.
Jennifer expected a senior guard, someone who could command the inmates' respect. Instead, she says she got her first lesson in how life really works on the inside.
Inmates ran that place. It wasn't the officers. It wasn't. And I hate to say that, but it wasn't.
In fact, according to Jennifer, it wasn't just the inmates that ran the prison. It was one inmate in particular.
George Hyatt had manipulated the system. He had tried to get everything to work for him.
He's supposed to be a really smooth and slick talker.
A career criminal with convictions for burglary, armed robbery, and assault, George had been in and out of prison since he was a teen, and he wasn't always out on parole.
He had been charged several times with escape.
Serving a 35-year sentence for assaulting a guard, George's exploits had earned him respect and fear from his fellow inmates.
He became affiliated with a gang in prison, and he had that attitude of wanting to be intimidating, wanting to be that bully.
The other inmates were afraid of him. They wouldn't want to do anything to piss him off.
The sexual harassment stopped, and soon Jennifer started to suspect that her protector was more than just another inmate.
He would hand me $100, say, here, go do your hair, go do your makeup, go do your nails, go do something, go have fun.
Jennifer liked the cash, but she loved the way George made her feel.
He always made me feel special, like I was number one.
And it wasn't long before Jennifer found herself falling for George.
She was madly in love with George. They were going to be so happy.
He had me convinced that he was wrongly prosecuted. It was only a matter of time before he was free.
Even within the prison, however, there were limits to George's influence. In August of 2004, Jennifer lost her job after guards caught her smuggling contraband into George.
I got fired for bringing shrimp to him one day.
She was caught bringing in food into the prison for George. Well, that's a no-no.
And the shrimp had just been a tiny portion of what Jennifer fetched for George.
I brought him in $500 one time. I took him a cell phone one time.
George kept the phone hidden in his cell. Over the next 12 months, it would become the shackle that kept Jennifer chained to her convict boyfriend. Out of a job in the summer of 2004, Jennifer didn't think she'd hear from George again.
I'm like, he was probably just using me.
But George kept calling her. He sent her gifts and letters professing that he still loved her. He even asked Jennifer to marry him.
I believed him. I couldn't do anything for him, so what would be the motivation for him to lie to me?
Did George truly love Jennifer? Or was he plotting something far bigger than smuggling cell phones and shrimp? One thing was certain, he pulled out the stops when it came to convincing Jennifer he was sincere. In fact, George even showered Jennifer's family with gifts.
He would send me and my mother flowers, goodie baskets, and stuff like that.
But would a few bouquets and goodie baskets be enough to get Jennifer's family to overlook the fact that George was in prison?
He was Very, very sweet. He was very nice.
And Jennifer? She filed for a divorce from her second husband in November of 2004 and devoted herself entirely to George.
He would call me 24 hours a day. I had to sleep with the phone in my ear. If I didn't, I was cussed and screamed and hollered at and called every name in the book.
She would fall asleep. He would scream and holler and threaten suicide and threaten to leave her if she didn't wake up and talk to him.
George also monitored every call Jennifer made.
I had to keep it on with an earpiece in my pocket so that he could hear every conversation I had.
And to keep the true nature of their abusive relationship secret, he took particular care to monitor what Jennifer said to her family.
She could not call a family member without him being on the phone to see what was being said.
So why didn't she just hang up?
She had been taken advantage of by men most of her life, and I think George Hyatt saw her coming from a mile away.
She's easily manipulated. I think Jennifer was scared and in love all at the same time.
On May 21st, 2005, Jennifer and George wed in the visitor center at the Riverbend Maximum Security Institution.
It took about 15-20 minutes, and I had to leave.
And the next time the newlyweds met face to face, gunfire would soon follow. In June of 2005, Jennifer sent her kids home to Utah and took a new job as a live-in nurse for a woman named Betty Dye.
She was my husband's nurse, and she was real good to him, very attentive.
And how did Jennifer explain her absent boyfriend who was always on the phone? It was easy.
I thought he was a soldier in Iraq.
For Jennifer, however, her one-time protector had become a torturer. She started taking medication for anxiety and depression and thought increasingly of suicide.
She just thought she would be better off not around.
And on the night of June 24th, 2005, Jennifer decided to act. She unscrewed the cap on her medication and poured pills out by the handful.
I just decided to take them. Took it all. Like 15,000 milligrams of Elavil. And George called me, like, as I was taking the last of them. He heard, I guess, the pill bottle or whatever.
Over the phone, Jennifer told George that she had taken the pills.
He freaked out. Go to the hospital, go to the hospital, go to the hospital. And I finally got tired of hearing it, so I got in the truck and I left.
While Jennifer drove, George called the hospital. Emergency room staff found Jennifer in the parking lot, passed out in her truck.
She was in a coma for a couple of days on a respirator.
They had told Miss Betty to call my family because I wouldn't make it another 24 hours.
Jennifer survived. But what would she do when she woke up? Would she finally call the police and inform them of George's abuse? Or would she decide on something more drastic than suicide to escape the nightmare she was living? On the morning of August 9th, 2005, 2 weeks after the suicide attempt, 2 prison guards led a shackled George Hyatt across the courthouse parking lot in Kingston, Tennessee.
He was getting ready to face new charges in Roane County.
For George, each court appearance was a brief taste of freedom.
In some courthouses, the jail is attached to the courthouse. That is not the case in Kingston. So if they're walking somebody in, that's an inmate, they have to walk them right through that parking lot.
But that morning, as the guards walked George to the corrections van that was supposed to take him back to prison, a Ford Explorer pulled into the parking lot. It was Jennifer.
I pulled up behind the van, and I got out of the truck. I had the gun in my hand.
Coming up, Jennifer's desperate act leaves one man dead. But which man?
She fired one fatal shot.
On the morning of August 9th, 2005, prison guards Wayne Cotton Morgan and Larry Porky Harris were loading incarcerated felon George Hyatt into a Tennessee corrections van when a Ford Explorer squealed to a stop behind them. George's wife, Jennifer Hyatt, stepped out of the truck and leveled a 9mm handgun at the 3 men. George's psychological abuse had driven her to attempt suicide just weeks before, and now it was about to drive Jennifer to something worse.
I said, "Hey guys." One of them turned around and looked at me, and he said, "Go away." And that's when George yelled, "Shoot him."
She fired one fatal shot.
She didn't, however, shoot her abusive husband. She did exactly as he told her. The failure of her suicide attempt, according to Jennifer, had finally broken what little will she'd had to resist.
After that week in the hospital, I realized I couldn't fight anymore.
He used and abused her. Jennifer Hyatt was brainwashed in the classic sense.
Bullied into obeying his every command, Jennifer had spent the 2 weeks since the suicide attempt on the phone with George, planning the escape attempt.
I was supposed to hold the gun on him. He was going to grab their guns, and we were supposed to put them in the van and then just drive away.
But that morning, the plan changed.
And that's when George yelled, "Shoot him." Cotton Morgan turned around and he grabbed the gun. And it scared me.
Struck in the abdomen by Jennifer's first shot, Officer Morgan fell to the ground. Then, as bystanders dove for cover, Jennifer unloaded her weapon at Officer Porky Harris.
Porky starts shooting back.
There was a gun battle right there in the parking lot.
Jennifer ran back to the Explorer. George Hyatt bolted from the prison van and tried to escape through the intense gunfire.
He's bound at the ankles, but he was able to scurry, basically, across the parking lot.
As Jennifer pulled away, Officer Harris continued firing.
The other officer emptied his duty weapon, and then was able to get Cotton's weapon and empty it.
He shot the front of the truck trying to hit the tires.
He failed. The Explorer pulled out of the parking lot and disappeared into the traffic.
It happened so fast, a minute and a half.
Police and emergency personnel were on the scene in minutes. Cotton Morgan was airlifted to the University of Tennessee Medical Center in Knoxville, but it was too late.
The in-flight nurse told me at UT that for all intents and purposes, Dad was gone when they got him on the helicopter.
Back in Kingston, the town was in a state of siege. Schools were locked down, streets closed, law enforcement blanketed the town.
The next thing you know, there's TBI there, there's FBI, helicopters, dogs.
Within probably an hour and a half, there was probably 350 officers here to help search.
Police soon found Jennifer's Explorer a few blocks away behind a Subway restaurant. And they discovered that Porky Harris's shots at the fleeing Explorer hadn't been entirely in vain.
They found bullet holes in it.
There was blood, too, but there was no sign of the fugitives. However, a Kingston fireman who lived across the street did give police a solid description of the Hyatt's getaway vehicle, a gold Chevy minivan.
He had remembered a van backing in there that night prior to the incident.
Where the fugitives had gone, however, was anyone's guess.
You are near I-40 and very close to I-75 split. So at that time, we had our hands full trying to get a direction.
As authorities launched a nationwide manhunt, the media pounced on the story.
U.S. Marshals were all over on alert looking for them. There was a lot of appeal from the media.
And considering a young woman had just broken her incarcerated lover out of jail amidst a blaze of gunfire, it wasn't long before the press made the obvious comparison.
It was like a modern-day Bonnie and Clyde, the escape, the daring escape, the disregard for human life, the shooting right there in public.
As news outlets ran with the breaking story, police back in Kingston tried to piece together the morning's events. According to what Officer Harris told his superiors, Jennifer had met with George briefly that morning, shortly after he'd arrived for his hearing.
Cotton Morgan had gone out of his way to be helpful to Jennifer and George Hyatt, allowing them some privacy to decide what to do on George Hyatt's case.
Or had they been plotting his escape? One thing was certain, the ensuing shootout had been captured on the courthouse security cameras.
In the video, you can see a vehicle pull up just behind the van and stay there for just a few seconds and then flee off.
By the end of the day, that gun battle remained the last confirmed sighting of the fugitives. But the media attention was already generating a flood of leads. People were seeing the Hyatts everywhere.
We had hundreds of tips coming in. Yes, I've seen this vehicle, it's here.
Most of the tips turned out to be dead ends.
Well, how many vans like that one are they on the interstate?
But would the police eventually find and stop the right one? The one that was, at that moment, racing north on I-75. Inside the van, Jennifer was putting all of her nursing skills to work on herself. Shot during the escape attempt, it was her blood that the authorities had found in the ditched Explorer.
The officer shot the truck several times. One came in the back window and through my seat and grazed me.
And as the fugitives raced north, Jennifer did what she could to stop the bleeding.
My whole left leg was soaked. I had shirts wrapped around my leg.
George, behind the wheel, apparently had no intention of stopping or seeking help for his wounded bride.
He really didn't seem too concerned. He just kept driving. Said we had to get out of Tennessee.
Fleeing Tennessee, they were across Kentucky and almost in Ohio, just across the river from Cincinnati, when Jennifer told George she couldn't go on.
I says, we've got to stop. I can't go anymore.
They went up I-75, spent the night in Erlanger, Kentucky. At that point, that's where they get rid of the gun.
George's shackles weren't quite so easy to get rid of, however.
We stopped at a Lowe's because we needed some way to get his shackles off.
There was only one problem. With Jennifer's legs soaked in blood and George's legs clapped in irons, there was no way they could go into the store. So George, thinking fast, pulled into the store's loading area.
The van that we were in had a handicap sticker. And so one of the ladies came out that worked at Lowe's and asked if we needed anything.
George requested a hacksaw. Within an hour, the couple was checking into an Erlanger Econo Lodge. There, with his legs finally free, George's thoughts turned to his bride. It was, after all, their first night together as man and wife.
All he was interested in was sex. I hadn't even gotten bleeding stopped, and that's what he wanted. He didn't care. He just said, put a towel on it.
After consummating their marriage, the fugitives settled down for the evening.
He ordered pizza. I passed out.
When she awoke a few hours later, she discovered that George had been busy.
He had cut all my hair off and told me that I had to dye it black.
George had reason. Their motel TV was buzzing with news bulletins about the modern-day Bonnie and Clyde. And it was only then that Jennifer realized they were wanted for more than just a jailbreak.
When I found out the officer died, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I didn't know he had died. I had no clue. And I asked George, I said, does he have family? Did you know him? What have I done?
And what would happen to Jennifer and her husband if the police caught up to them? The sun had barely come up the next morning when federal marshals and local police surrounded the Erlanger Econo Lodge. Overnight, witnesses had spotted the fugitives' minivan parked outside.
They narrowed it down to, hey, yeah, this is a vehicle. We know it's them.
But when the officers stormed the room, all they found were blood-soaked towels, a set of handcuffs and shackles, a hacksaw, and a few personal items. In a dumpster outside, police found a 9mm pistol. And when investigators ran the plates on the gold van parked nearby, they discovered that it belonged to Jennifer's employer, Betty Dye.
The grandchildren saw my van on TV, and then the TBI and FBI moved in.
That evening, TBI agents discovered that the Dyes had unwittingly aided in the escape plan.
It was a pretty elaborate scheme. It was a lot of work that she put into putting these vehicles in place.
Jennifer had convinced Mrs. Dye to loan her the gold minivan.
She told me that George was going to lose his daughter if she didn't go to court and testify for him because he was in Iraq.
Jennifer, of course, had driven the van to Kingston, collected the Explorer, and launched her escape plan. And now she and George were on the run. But where? As the sun went down on August 10th, authorities were trying to get a fix on the fugitives. Were George and Jennifer still in Erlanger, or had they fled in another stashed getaway car? That evening, the authorities in Cincinnati received a promising lead.
There was a cab driver who brought a couple matching the description to a hotel.
Unfortunately, it wasn't until hours after dropping them off that the Cincinnati cab driver made the connection.
He turned the news on and said, you know, that's the couple that I took to the hotel, to Columbus.
The cab driver explained that he'd picked up the Hyatts at their motel in Erlanger, Kentucky, just south of Cincinnati, and driven them all the way to a second hotel in Columbus.
Cincinnati is not close to Columbus. It's about 2 hours and 15 minutes between the two cities.
The cab driver explained to police that the Hyatts told him they had been in a car wreck and that they needed to get to Columbus for an Amway conference.
They said they were with Amway and they were doing some things up in Columbus with a conference.
Acting on the tip, the U.S. Marshals and the Columbus SWAT moved quickly into position.
We had the whole place surrounded. There was nowhere they could have gone.
Coming up, would the Hyatts surrender peacefully, or would the modern-day Bonnie and Clyde live up to their notorious namesakes?
You have no idea what to expect on the other side of that door.
On the evening of August 10th, Jennifer Hyatt awoke from a fretful sleep in room 236B of the America's Best Value Inn in Columbus, Ohio.
I had fallen asleep for a little while, and when I woke up, I guess I'd been dreaming about what had happened. And the first thing out of my mouth was, they're going to give me the death penalty for this.
A little over 24 hours earlier, she'd blasted her husband George out of jail. In the process, she'd shot and killed corrections officer Wayne Cotton Morgan.
I never planned on shooting anybody. It was just supposed to be a scare tactic.
George, still savoring his first full day of freedom, shrugged off their predicament.
He's like, it's not going to be that big of a deal.
Moments later, the phone rang.
I figured it was front desk saying, we're going to send up towels now.
A female voice answered, and I just stated, Jennifer. She said yes.
U.S. Marshal Nikki Ralston flashed a thumbs up to the U.S. Marshals poised outside the Hyatt's room.
I was actually kind of shocked. If I was on the run, I was in a hotel room and the phone rang, I probably would not have answered the phone.
Ralston told Jennifer that she was surrounded by law enforcement.
I said, you need to get George, you need to lay the phone down, and you need to walk outside with your hands held high.
A tense moment followed, the Marshals and Columbus SWAT ready to open fire at the slightest sign of trouble.
I could hear her set the phone down. I heard some faint whispering.
George asked me, he goes, who is it? I said, the U.S. Marshals, we need to come out.
Jennifer and George's blood-soaked honeymoon had started with a shootout. Would it end in another? After a day and a half on the run, Jennifer and George gave themselves up.
I walked out the door, and they told me to face them and walk towards them. And when I got to them, they put those zip cord cuffs on.
The Marshals also cuffed George and quickly whisked him off to jail. But Jennifer wouldn't follow just yet.
They called EMTs in, and the EMT says, we want her to go to the hospital. They wanted to make sure there was no bullets in my leg.
Handcuffed in the back of a police cruiser, bloody and under arrest for murder, Jennifer's first thoughts were of George.
She immediately went into, is George okay? What's going to happen to George? She didn't care much about herself. It was all about George.
She didn't even want to go to the hospital. She only wanted to be with George.
Jennifer was treated for her wounds, then transferred to the Franklin County Jail. Questioned by the authorities, Jennifer took complete responsibility for Officer Morgan's death.
She She says she did it because she loved him.
Jennifer soon learned that Cotton Morgan might not be the only one to die because of her attempt to free George.
For shooting a corrections officer in cold blood, premeditated, she was looking at the death penalty.
Would prosecutors seek it? Without a doubt, if the public opinion back in Kingston was any indication.
The public was outraged by this crime. This was a killing that went to the core of this small town in East Tennessee.
The Hyatts weren't in East Tennessee, however. Before prosecutors could put George and Jennifer on trial, they'd have to get them back into the state. On the morning of August 12th, the fugitives appeared separately in an Ohio courtroom for their extradition hearings.
The Hyatts appeared in court the next day, Jennifer first, George second.
Well aware that Jennifer had confessed, her attorney knew that she faced an almost certain conviction upon returning to Tennessee for trial. His advice? Delay the inevitable.
My lawyer advised me to refuse extradition, so that's what I did.
We are requesting that a warrant be issued by the governor of the state of Tennessee.
Buying time for his client, Jennifer's attorney told the court that Tennessee's governor would have to file a formal extradition request before she would return to the state. Jennifer looked on in silence.
She just didn't know what to do, didn't know what she was doing, and had never been in this kind of situation before.
George, on the other hand, had been in and out of courtrooms his entire adult life.
He seemed to have disdain for everyone, the police, the witnesses.
And he wasn't afraid of facing a Tennessee jury.
I want to sign, Your Honor. I want to sign my extradition.
But when his attorney informed him that Jennifer was going to fight, George did an abrupt about-face.
I'm not going to do her without her, but okay.
Like Bonnie and Clyde before them, George and Jennifer seemed determined to go down together. The same day Jennifer and George were in an Ohio courtroom, the people of Tennessee said goodbye to Officer Cotton Morgan.
It was one of the largest funerals in Morgan County. We had to have the funeral in the elementary school gymnasium. And I think it was over 2,000 people there.
That just sent chills at my back, just seeing that support.
3 weeks after Wayne Morgan was laid to rest, the town of Kingston showed a different sort of support. Tennessee's governor had signed the extradition warrant, and on August 22nd, U.S. Marshals took Jennifer and George Hyatt back to the very spot the corrections officer had been gunned down.
They brought them separately. They wouldn't tell us what time they were supposed to be there.
The Hyatts also arrived in unmarked cars, but the precautions didn't deter the angry crowd waiting for them at the courthouse.
There were people who lined the street and shouted at them.
And unlike the morning George escaped, there were far more than 2 guards on hand to escort the Hyatts across the parking lot.
Security was phenomenally tight. More police cruisers than the town of Kingston's probably ever seen.
Inside the courthouse, armed guards brought the Hyatts before the judge.
Both were shackled rather heavily.
But while the press had once compared the couple to Bonnie and Clyde, onlookers couldn't help but ask, was the quiet woman shackled next to George the same outlaw who broke her lover out of jail, killing a lawman in the process?
Jennifer, she seemed medicated when she came to court, honestly.
She didn't utter a word as the judge announced the charges against her and the possible outcome.
They had filed an intent to seek the death penalty.
After charges were filed, the Hyatts were remanded into custody. Bail was not an option.
Immediately after the hearing, they were sent to separate prisons.
With the fugitives finally locked away behind maximum security bars, the state of Tennessee began building a first-degree murder case against Jennifer Hyatt.
There was rock-solid evidence in this case against her.
The state had eyewitnesses, surveillance video, even a signed confession. But would it be enough to convince a jury to sentence a mother of 3 to death? Coming up, a jailhouse journal reveals the mind of a killer.
whatever is in a prison cell, it does not have a reasonable expectation of privacy.
And the defense makes a desperate gamble to avoid a death sentence.
It was an unfair type of thing to put before us as a family.
In the fall of 2005, Jennifer Hyatt was back in a Tennessee penitentiary. But the former prison nurse wasn't working. She was awaiting trial. Jennifer had been charged with gunning down Tennessee Corrections Officer Wayne Cotton Morgan during a jailbreak to free her incarcerated husband, George Hyatt. Now, facing a possible death sentence, there appeared to be little hope for Jennifer, short of a second jailbreak.
There was no question that Jennifer Hyatt was the person who fired the gun that killed Cotton Morgan.
We had an eyewitness. We had the murder weapon. Everything was strong about this case.
In fact, with a conviction almost a foregone conclusion, the ultimate decision in Jennifer and George's all but open and shut case wasn't in the hands of the jury. Instead, the fate of this modern-day Bonnie and Clyde ultimately rested with the family of the man they'd murdered. The state had already filed a death penalty case against the Hyatts, but when it came to actually pursuing it, the prosecutors passed the buck.
The Attorney General, they made it very plain that they sort of left it up to the family.
And that fall, the family had no doubts. Jennifer and George deserved death.
I don't know if it was just anger or whether it was just me wanting to see her die or pay for what she had done.
There was only one complication.
Any jury is very hesitant about taking the life of a woman, but even more importantly, taking the life of a mother of 3 young children. They can't separate the consequences that that decision will have on those children's lives for years to come.
In the end, everything would hinge on whether the jury saw Jennifer as a willing accomplice or a desperate woman at the end of her rope. Unfortunately for the defense, prosecutors had some damaging evidence that strongly suggested the former. And it came direct from Jennifer. Back in August, when Jennifer was extradited to Tennessee, she'd left a few things behind in her cell.
The jailers, as a routine procedure, searched her jail cell. At that point, they found a number of letters to different people, including George Hyatt, and also a journal that she had begun while she was in custody.
All I was allowed to have in there was paper and pencil. So that's what I did. I wrote. And I just basically wrote a life history.
The defense feared the writings would dispel any doubt that Jennifer was anything but a willing accomplice, starting with the words she'd scrawled across the top of her journal.
She had actually entitled it The Modern Day Bonnie and Clyde.
And the letters? Written to friends and family, Jennifer had signed each one with her new nickname, Bonnie.
That was, as you can imagine, not helpfful to us.
Jennifer's attorneys fought to suppress the Bonnie and Clyde journal and her letters, claiming they'd been improperly seized.
They'd come and got me and took me down to booking. And the U.S. Marshals were down there. And I'm like, oh, am I leaving? They're like, yeah. I said, what about all my stuff in my cell? We'll send it to you. And I never got it.
Despite her attorney's protest, the judge ruled to allow Jennifer's letters and journal as evidence.
The law is pretty clear that whatever is in a prison cell, it does not have a reasonable expectation of privacy.
Faced with overwhelming evidence and Jennifer's incriminating letters, the defense had only one hope for saving Jennifer's life.
We had asked for a plea bargain in April of '06, and it was denied. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
According to Jennifer's attorney, prosecutors denied the request due to tremendous pressure from Officer Morgan's family.
The family did not want to settle this case. They wanted to see the ultimate punishment.
To escape that punishment, the defense did the only thing they could do. They had their client start another journal of sorts, a detailed statement that portrayed Jennifer not as Bonnie Parker, but as an abused woman.
We wanted to convey that George Hyatt was the mastermind behind this entire incident, and that Jennifer Hyatt was a puppet under his control.
To back up their account, Jennifer's attorneys collected phone records to illustrate George's relentless surveillance and medical records chronicling Jennifer's suicide attempt.
You could see him ratcheting up the pressure on her to go through with his plans. And after her suicide attempt, I believe she was just vulnerable enough to believe that it was the only thing that she could do to save her own life.
I had basically given up trying to fight him.
And to cap things off, the defense sent a camera crew to Utah.
My lawyer had went out to Salt Lake and interviewed my mom and my kids and a couple of other family members.
Probably 15, 20 minutes long, talking with Jennifer Hyatt's children, just talking about what a death sentence would mean to them.
Pray that she don't get the death penalty.
Then, well aware whose hands held Jennifer's fate, her attorney sent the entire package to Officer Morgan's family.
It was an unfair type of thing to put before us. Someone that I love was taken from me. Someone they love was taken away from them, but they're in prison. They still have their life.
Coming up, Jennifer's life hangs in the balance, and Officer Morgan's family faces a choice. Will it be mercy?
I think that's a hard thing for anybody to have on their conscience.
Or vengeance?
We wanted to press further for the death penalty.
In the fall of 2007, time was running out for Jennifer Hyatt. Her trial date looming, she faced certain conviction for the murder of prison guard Wayne Morgan. And the dead man's family was pushing for the maximum punishment.
We wanted to press further for the death penalty.
Anxious to avoid a death sentence, the defense made one last emotional request for a plea bargain to the victim's family.
The district attorney's office gave us some DVDs of an interview with Jennifer's mother, and we saw her children.
But would the unorthodox defense tactic pay off?
I think that had a lot to do with, kind of softening my heart a little bit.
An early morning house fire results in a horrific tragedy.
We get a call for a structure fire with a person trapped inside.
The flames were immense. They burned to death.
Leaving a small Texas town searching for answers.
There were no accelerants. There had been nothing that showed physically that a fire had been set.
Was the mysterious blaze simply an accident?
We found a broken bottle of what we later determined to be Wild Turkey 101.
Or was there another explanation?
They both had boyfriends, girlfriends.
The answer in the end would hinge upon one deceptively simple question.
Without a clear arson finding, you can't have murder.
May 14th, 2003. It was just before 4 a.m. when Ren and Lindsay O'Neill were startled awake by a pounding at their front door in Little Elm, Texas. Outside, they found their next-door neighbor, 29-year-old Rhonda Orr, and her 10-year-old daughter.
My only memory is saying, the house is on fire, call 911, I gotta go get Jimmy, he's stuck in the bedroom.
Rhonda's husband, Jimmy, needed a wheelchair to get around, and he was still trapped inside when firefighters arrived moments later.
The firemen put out the fire just enough to try to get in, and eventually they found Jimmy.
Rescuers rushed Jimmy outside and began resuscitation efforts on the front lawn.
I remember them doing CPR, and I remembered this rush of relief they got him out.
But it was too late.
around his mouth and nose was black, so you could tell that he had taken a lot of smoke.
What had caused the deadly blaze that ripped through the bedroom where Jimmy was sleeping? An examination of the charred remains shed little light on the mystery.
We were unable to determine a source of ignition.
Though they didn't find it in the house, the Orr's personal life did offer some possibilities.
He and Ronnie were getting a divorce. Things obviously were not good at home.
They didn't get along well enough for the marriage to last.
Had the fire truly been an accident? Or had the couple's differences finally reached the flashpoint? Rhonda and Jimmy Orr first met in 1998. At the time, Rhonda was living in suburban Dallas with her 5-year-old daughter.
It was just me and her, just our own little family.
Lonely, the 25-year-old single mother started spending more time online. That's where she met Jimmy, who worked as a recreational therapist at a Dallas area rec center.
I was playing internet games, and we met in a Dallas area room, and we started talking.
Soon their online conversations grew into a near daily correspondence, and it wasn't long before the pair decided to meet.
I said, well, how will I know you? Because we'd only talked on the internet and on the phone. And he said, well, I told you about the chair, didn't I? And I said, no, what are you talking about?
Rhonda learned that Jimmy was partially dependent on a wheelchair, disabled from the waist down as the result of a childhood accident. But when Rhonda met him at a shopping center, she quickly witnessed how little he was confined by his handicap.
James was not paralyzed. He had some balance difficulties from an accident when he was younger. And he used the chair more because it was easier. If he had something to hold on to, he could walk. There wasn't anything that Jimmy couldn't do.
He didn't want to be considered handicapped. He wanted to be typical.
But while impressed with Jimmy's capabilities and eager to grow their friendship, Rhonda told Jimmy she wasn't ready for a romantic relationship.
We started out as friends. I had told him that I wasn't going to get married again. I was perfectly satisfied as a single mother, not looking for a relationship.
Rhonda may have been satisfied, but she was also impressed by how Jimmy treated her daughter.
He was just a good-hearted guy, very, very into and concerned and interested in Rhonda's little girl, and talked about her constantly.
He was loving, doted on her, spoiled her to some extent.
Jimmy's obvious affection for the little girl didn't go unnoticed by Rhonda. Before long, she and Jimmy began dating.
If you knew James, it's not surprising, but he won me over.
He's always loved children and wanted to be married and have a family.
So in January of 1999, after only a couple months of dating, Jimmy decided to make it official.
He took me up to the big ball you see in the Dallas skylights. At the top of the world, as far as you can get in Dallas, he proposed.
4 months later, the couple married, and Rhonda and her daughter moved into Jimmy's home in suburban Dallas.
It was great. They had a nice big swimming pool in the back, and they'd have birthday parties, and Jimmy'd be out grilling hamburgers and hot dogs.
To help out the young couple, Jimmy's mother and stepfather picked up the tab for some of their expenses.
We did a lot for those kids. They're struggling, you know how it is when you get started.
The assistance was welcome, even if Rhonda bristled at her mother-in-law's intrusions.
We didn't have the best relationship. Every minute of our lives, she ran things. She just took over.
Even though Marian was generous with gifts and things, she had expectations with her son, Jimmy, as well as with Rhonda.
Despite the strain between mother and daughter-in-law, the arrangement did have its advantages. Jimmy's mother told the couple she and her husband would help cover tuition for them so they could both go back to school. Rhonda for nursing and Jimmy for computers. They also provided Rhonda a job at the family's sheet metal business.
I told her she could work for us part-time. I would pay her whatever she had been making working full-time until she got her degree so she could have a career.
The charity didn't end there either. In late 2001, the Pools also helped the couple finance the construction of a new custom home outside Dallas in the town of Little Elm.
We had doors widened so that he could have access to every room. Pretty much the whole house was accessible to Jimmy. There wasn't any area he couldn't get to except the attic.
Designed to accommodate Jimmy's wheelchair, the new home provided the couple with plenty of space. Unfortunately, they'd soon need every inch of it. In the spring of 2002, not long after moving into their new house, the couple started drifting apart.
He began to want different things, and our interests just kind of went separate ways.
Jimmy had joined a car club and began going to shows and racing cars with his friends.
James had a black SS, a Camaro SS. We'd go to drag race events and he'd race the car at a drag strip.
Rhonda was rarely there to cheer her husband on.
The car things, she wasn't interested in that. They really didn't have much in common.
It was something Rhonda made quite obvious on the few occasions she did show up at the racetrack.
He'd be out looking at the cars, talking with all of us, or working on his car, and she always was sitting down reading a book, and she just seemed detached, like they barely knew each other.
Before long, Rhonda and Jimmy were living more as roommates than soulmates.
They were living in separate rooms, and they were no longer intimate.
There was just a parting of the ways. Things just weren't working out.
By the fall of 2002, Rhonda and Jimmy both agreed their marriage had failed, but didn't file for divorce just yet. Instead, they decided on a trial basis to remain living together under one roof as friends.
I don't think there was never an attorney. There was never anything legal done. They were just married. They were just had agreement to live separate.
I took care of him. We still went out to eat. We still went out to movies. I mean, we lived just as we had before. It really wasn't a change because we were friends all along.
And since they were no longer intimate, both Rhonda and Jimmy eventually sought solace in new relationships.
He got himself on an internet dating site and had met a couple people and was just kind of having dating fun.
Rhonda also started a relationship with a mutual friend of theirs.
Jimmy had his girlfriend. She had nobody. And I think this whole relationship come about because it was kind of shoulder to cry on.
Soon, Jimmy and Rhonda's platonic relationship began to unravel.
He finally decided, I can't do this anymore.
In November of 2002, Jimmy finally asked Rhonda for a divorce, but he asked nicely.
She was in nursing school. My husband and I were paying for her to get a bachelor's degree in nursing. And so he told her, I will stay until you're through with school, and then I want a divorce.
They were separating under very friendly terms. They had visited with the listing agent to put the house up on the market to sell, and were parting as friends.
It appeared, at least from the outside, to be an amicable divorce. Wednesday, May 14, 2003. Just minutes before 4 a.m., Denton County emergency dispatchers received a harrowing 911 call, reporting a house fire at 3081 Big Leaf Drive, the home of Rhonda and Jimmy Orr.
My next door neighbors are, I don't know if I've called already, but they have a fire at their house.
Worse, according to the caller, there was a man trapped inside the burning home.
Her husband is in a wheelchair and he can't get out.
Within minutes, emergency vehicles arrived at the Orr home.
Upon arrival, it seemed like there was a good, 15 to 20 people outside, and there was a fairly large crowd.
There were people yelling at us, trying to drag us off the engine when we got there, saying, hey, he's inside, her husband's inside there, please go help.
Firefighters rushed into the smoke-filled home.
It was completely full of smoke. There was a smoke line all the way to the floor. We had to crawl or pretty much be on our hands and knees to get to the back bedroom.
The whole bedroom was on fire. I made my way towards the right and looked in the bathroom and shined my flashlight in there, and that's where we found the victim.
Pulling Jimmy from the flames, firefighters rushed him outside. They started CPR, but the prognosis wasn't promising.
You could see some charring around his mouth. You could tell that he was in bad shape.
Unable to revive him at the scene, paramedics loaded Jimmy into an ambulance and rushed him to Trinity Medical Center in nearby Carrollton, Texas. Rhonda followed moments later, loaded into a second ambulance.
I felt obligated to go ahead and get her transported as well. to a medical facility to have her checked out.
Upon her arrival at Trinity's emergency room, she asked everyone she passed if they knew the status of her husband.
I asked the paramedics, I asked everybody, you know, what's going on with my husband? What's going on with my husband? And I remember a nurse looked at me and just said, "Oh no, he didn't make it."
Coming up, police question whether the tragic fire really had been an accident.
I kept telling him, you know, come on, let's go, let's go.
She felt that he was just fighting to stay in this room.
Whenever I grabbed him his clothes, he just came back. How had I tried to approach? He came back.
On the morning of May 14, 2003, Rhonda Orr sat in the emergency room of Trinity Medical Center in Carrollton, Texas. The 29-year-old wife and mother was being treated for possible smoke inhalation. Hours earlier, a sudden blaze had ripped through her home.
There was heavy smoke coming out of the front door, flames coming out of the rear of the structure.
Rhonda and her 10-year-old daughter had escaped, but her husband Jimmy, partially dependent upon a wheelchair, hadn't been so lucky.
He got trapped and was overcome by smoke.
I finally called my best friend and I was just like, Jimmy didn't make it. That's when it hit me like a ton of bricks.
Jimmy's mother, Marion Poole, was equally hard hit.
Mother's Day, which was the last time I saw him, he asked me to meet him for lunch that following Wednesday, May 14th. He died early that morning, so I didn't get to see him.
While the realization sank in with Rhonda, firefighters were still dousing her home. Hoping to determine what had caused the blaze, investigators started collecting evidence back at the house and contacting witnesses.
Somebody at the hospital told my mom they wanted us to come back to the house. The police wanted to talk to me.
Minutes later, Rhonda arrived back at the house with her daughter.
I asked her to sit down in my patrol vehicle, and I asked her to tell me, as in much detail as she can, how things transpired that morning.
Seated in the patrol car, Rhonda told investigators she wasn't exactly certain what sparked the fire in her house, but she suspected it might have something to do with her husband, a tipped-over candle, and a bottle of whiskey.
What do you think actually caused the fire? At that time, my first inclination was that he knocked the candle off.
Apparently he had candles near the bed and built the drink near the candles, and that's what started the fire.
According to Rhonda, the entire scenario had begun the evening before the fire. She told detectives that she and her daughter had been watching television in the living room when Jimmy had suddenly wheeled through the house, heavily inebriated and slurring his words.
She said he comes rolling through the living room at about 10 and that I'm toasted and I'm gonna go to bed.
He was in a great mood. He was smiling and he was laughing.
According to Rhonda, Jimmy had wheeled down the hallway to his bedroom and gone to sleep. A few hours later, Rhonda was startled awake by the blaring of the home's alarm system and the smell of smoke. She told police the smoke had come from Jimmy's bedroom.
When I got to the room, Jimmy was sitting on the side of the bed. There was a candle knocked down on the floor, and the liquor bottle was laying on its side on the end table, running all over the carpet.
He's patting it out with a towel. And she's, complains to him, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "I'll clean it up, don't worry about it."
Rhonda said she'd then returned to her bedroom and gone to sleep. But it hadn't been long before she'd been reawoken by the smoke alarm.
My first instinct was, here we go again. And I got up and I went out in the hallway, and immediately you could tell it was much different. There was smoke, you could see smoke way up high.
Rhonda said she'd rushed back down to Jimmy's bedroom.
The door was closed, but under the door, you could just see bright flickering. And I was like, oh my God, it's on fire.
Realizing the bedroom was now engulfed in flames, she'd yanked her daughter from her bed and, according to Rhonda, immediately ran next door for help.
She went to the next door neighbors.
My only memory is saying, the house is on fire, call 911, I gotta go get Jimmy, he's stuck in the bedroom.
Rhonda told police that she'd left her daughter with the neighbors and then sprinted back to her burning home in an effort to rescue her husband.
I got there to the door and the bedroom door was open and Jimmy was on the floor. Behind him was just a 14-foot wall of fire.
Rhonda told investigators she'd entered the flaming room and tried to help Jimmy into his wheelchair. but she said he'd violently fought her assistance.
Whenever I grabbed him his clothes, he just kicked at me. No matter how hard I tried to pull him, he just kicked at me.
According to her, she felt that he was just fighting to stay in this room.
Was he simply drunk? Or was Jimmy, his marriage a failure, and his family falling apart, determined to die in the flames?
I couldn't understand why, and I kept telling him, you know, come on, let's go, let's go.
The fight ended, according to Rhonda, when Jimmy suddenly kicked her in the chest.
Rhonda Orr stated when Jimmy kicked her, he kicked her so hard that she went out of the bedroom, the door slammed behind her, and it locked.
I was there in the doorway, and I just kept screaming, Jimmy, come on. Jimmy, come on. You know, I don't know what's wrong with him. Just come on.
Unable to open the door, Rhonda said she'd run back outside and asked her neighbor, Ren O'Neill, for help.
Mr. O'Neill went straight to the bedroom and she wanted him to kick it in. He felt the door and decided that that wasn't going to be a good idea for his own personal safety.
Rhonda told investigators that moments after that, police and fire officials had arrived on the scene. Following Rhonda's interview, police allowed her to return to her worried family. That didn't mean they believed her story, however.
She did not appear as she had been in a struggle in a house or a bedroom that was fully involved with fire. Anybody that was put in that position would have had soot on them, and that just wasn't the case.
At the scene, Rhonda's clothes, hair, and skin had been clean. And while she had gone to the ER as a precaution, the hospital had quickly released her, unlike two police officers who'd tried to rescue Jimmy.
I had just had 2 police officers transported to the hospital. They had smoke inhalation where she had no evidence of that whatsoever.
Those weren't the only reasons detectives doubted Rhonda's rescue story either. Later that morning, investigators spoke with Rhonda's next-door neighbor, Ren O'Neill. And his version of events from the night of the fire differed considerably from Rhonda's.
Mr. O'Neill told us he immediately went over to the house with Rhonda.
There'd been, according to O'Neill, no solo attempt at a rescue on Rhonda's part.
Her statement that she had gone back in an attempt to rescue her husband. Mr. O'Neill's statement totally refuted that. And again, another red flag that what she was telling us was not exactly correct.
That was hardly the last startling revelation laid on the detectives that morning either. Rhonda's mother-in-law, Marion Poole, arrived on the scene a few hours later.
She pulled me aside. She said, there's something not right about this. Rhonda told me at the hospital that James was drunk and James started the fire.
It was the same story Rhonda had told police. But as Marion pointed out, there was one big problem with the story.
Jim never drank. That can't possibly be true.
Was Rhonda lying? Or had Jimmy hidden his drinking from his own mother? One thing was certain. Investigators were starting to believe there was a lot more to the story than a simple house fire.
We started really, thinking that this was really going to be a murder case and it wasn't an accident.
Detectives had a chance to explore their theory later that morning when fire investigators finally entered the home and began to sift through its charred remains.
We found a broken bottle of what we later determined to be Wild Turkey 101. We found the candle that Miss Orr talked about in her statement.
That much at least seemed to confirm Rhonda's account. However, after 2 full days of investigation, fire investigators were no closer to knowing how the blaze had actually begun.
We were unable to determine a source of ignition.
A canine search said there were no accelerants. There had been nothing that showed physically that a fire had been set.
At the end of May, investigators received the results of the toxicology screen on Jimmy's body. The findings only added to the investigators' suspicions. There may have been a bottle of wild turkey in Jimmy's bedroom, but Jimmy, according to the report, hadn't touched it.
There was absolutely zero alcohol in Mr. Orr's body at the time of death.
The toxicology report discredited Rhonda's account of the events that took place that night, with her personally observing him drinking alcohol.
Coming up, police suspect foul play was behind Jimmy's death, especially when they learned that a third survivor had escaped the flames.
James, he had told me that she had seen somebody else. Cheated on him.
By June of 2003, Little Elm, Texas police and fire investigators were still searching for answers in the suspicious house fire that trapped and killed Jimmy Orr.
He couldn't get away, and he crawled in the bathroom, and he couldn't go any further, and he died. There's no doubt in my mind he was conscious as he began to burn.
Due to the inconsistencies in her statements to police, detectives suspected Jimmy's wife, Rhonda Orr, might be behind the blaze.
With all these red flags adding up, then we're starting to get a little bit suspicious.
But an initial examination of the home failed to turn up any signs of foul play.
The original fire marshals couldn't really determine arson. Well, if you don't have arson, you can't have murder, because he burned to death.
And considering how accommodating he'd been about postponing a divorce, what motive could Rhonda have for murdering Jimmy? Over the next few weeks, they spoke with several of Jimmy's friends from his car club. Investigators learned Jimmy had planned to move out of the house he and Rhonda shared.
We were supposed to move him that weekend right after it happened.
But hadn't Jimmy promised he'd stay with Rhonda until she finished school? Why the sudden change of heart? Jimmy's friends provided police with an answer. Rhonda and her daughter weren't the only ones who survived the tragic fire. There was also Rhonda's unborn baby.
Rhonda was pregnant by another man.
And it was the pregnancy, according to his friends, that finally prompted Jimmy to file for divorce.
He was very upset by it, very bothered by it.
He said, I'm not doing this anymore. And so he was going to move out and go ahead and get the divorce.
And a divorce, as the investigators learned, would cost Rhonda a lot more than her marriage.
Marion Poole, the victim's mother, was paying for her school. We had learned that Marion had actually put the down payment down on the house.
And if the divorce didn't cut Rhonda off from Marion Poole's money, the pregnancy surely would.
Rhonda knew that as soon as Jimmy's mother found out that Rhonda was pregnant with another man's child, she would be finished financially.
She didn't tell me about her pregnancy until several weeks after my son died.
By then, police suspected Rhonda no longer needed her mother-in-law's money.
We had received several phone calls from insurance companies that were inquiring as to Mr. Orr's death.
We discovered more and more insurance policies on James, which totaled, well up towards the $1 million range.
And the beneficiary? Rhonda Orr. To investigators, the motive was undeniable.
Basically what it boils down to, in my opinion, is she killed him for money.
Police were all but convinced that Rhonda, pregnant with another man's child, had set the fire to both stave off the impending divorce and collect on Jimmy's insurance. There was, however, one big problem with their theory.
We really couldn't put the match in Rhonda's hand.
There was no confession of any type. There's no eyewitness.
In an effort to extract a confession from Rhonda, lead police detective Donald Deviney called her and requested that she meet them at police headquarters.
He said he had copies of the final police report and to meet me up there.
At the police station, Rhonda and her daughter were ushered into separate interrogation rooms. And as soon as Rhonda walked in the door, she realized she was in for more than a simple review of the police report.
There was a Texas Ranger sitting in there, and I started to feel a little uneasy at this point.
Seated across from Texas Ranger Tracy Murphy, Rhonda was asked again what specifically sparked the fire in her home.
She initially gave the same story, that Jimmy had been drinking alcohol and had set an initial fire that set off the fire alarms.
When he came through the living room, it was pretty obvious to you that he was...
Oh yeah, he was laughing and he told me that he was toasted.
But midway through Rhonda's statement, Ranger Murphy confronted her with the toxicology report that directly refuted her story.
Ronnie, would it surprise you at all to know that he had no alcohol in his system?
Yeah, it would. He was laughing and he said he was toasted.
Then Ranger Murphy asked Rhonda about her husband's life insurance policies.
Why would you have close to $1 million worth of life insurance on Jimmy?
I don't have close to $1 million.
We've come up with $900,000 so far.
From where? I
The
haven't.
insurance policies you've taken out on him.
As soon as we provided evidence that she could not dispute, she became very defensive and completely changed her demeanor.
Rhonda refused to change her story, however.
It was basically, that's my story and I'm sticking to it type of conversation.
But what about Rhonda's daughter? Police were also interviewing her in another room. During a brief break in the interrogation, officers shared what they'd learned from her daughter. It wasn't good news for Rhonda.
Jimmy did not will through there and said he was toasted. She said that you told her to tell us that.
I don't believe you.
That's what she said.
In a final attempt to squeeze a confession out of Rhonda, Ranger Murphy turned up the heat.
I basically accused her of murder. And at that point, she called me a name I can't repeat here, and pretty much the interview was over at that point.
That afternoon, the police let Rhonda leave. However, investigators were confident they were on the right track. But the prosecutors, while armed with a mountain of circumstantial evidence, felt they were still short of a conviction.
Without a confession, without a clear arson finding, that would have been hard.
But what if the investigators at the scene had missed something? That October, in a last-ditch effort, investigators brought in a man named Ray Powell. With more than 30 years of experience, the veteran fire investigator hadn't exactly written the book on fire investigation. He'd written 6.
We brought in a tremendous arson expert. I call him the guy that invented fire.
Fire investigators, when they have an unusual fire, a lot of times they'll call and ask me about it or send photographs.
Although in this case, Powell did more than just look at photographs. 6 months after the fatal fire, he personally sifted through the charred remains of Jimmy's bedroom.
Mr. Powell went back over to the scene, did an examination of the area.
Earlier investigators had ruled out arson, mostly since tests had revealed no traces of an accelerant. But Powell wasn't too concerned. The whiskey bottle recovered from the crime scene, the one police believe Rhonda had planted, could have easily fueled the flames.
Alcohol burns clean. Unless they're looking for it, they will not be able to pick up the alcohol.
But if the whiskey explained away the lack of a traceable accelerant, Powell still faced a bigger question. Where'd the fire start? The burn patterns, according to Powell, indicated the fire that killed Jimmy originated from 2 different places within the bedroom.
We had 8 fires started in front of the window and another fire set in front of the door.
He was able to identify 2 start points. And anytime you have 2 start points, you have an arson.
But even more damning to investigators were the specific locations of the 2 fires.
We now had 2 points of origin that were in fact blocking Mr. Orr's ability to egress from the room. So this is when we were pretty sure that this was an intentionally set fire.
On February 26, 2004, Rhonda was formally indicted on felony arson charges.
When she received word that she had been indicted, she went and turned herself in.
Posting bond, Rhonda professed her innocence and predicted that a trial would exonerate her of all charges.
To be honest with you, I don't have a criminal bone in my body. I've never even been arrested. I've never been in trouble in my whole life.
Talking about a girl that never had really a traffic ticket.
Which is exactly why prosecutors feared it would be a challenge to convict her. Without solid physical evidence, their entire case hinged on the testimony of a single expert witness.
His report said arson, and it didn't take long to read his credentials to know that he was going to be a good witness.
Coming up, will a second opinion from a surprising source pour cold water on the prosecution's claim of arson.
They don't have to pay if a homeowner does something to their own home. They benefit from me being found guilty.
In March of 2008, more than 4 years since she'd been arrested, Rhonda Orr walked into the Denton County Courthouse to stand trial for the death of her husband, Jimmy. Charged with felony arson, the 34-year-old mother faced up to 99 years in prison if convicted.
She was charged with arson that caused a death. And it's the same punishment as murder. Murder one is a first-degree felon.
It was a trial that had almost never happened. The case had been stuck in limbo for nearly 5 years, while the Denton County District Attorney's Office had mulled over the strength of the state's evidence.
This was a circumstantial case, and circumstantial cases are harder to make than when you have good, solid physical evidence.
The case had been reset for 5 years. Witnesses' memories fade, people move away. It becomes very difficult to put it back together.
Among those who had moved on with their lives was Rhonda Orr. Out on bail after her arrest, she'd finished school, gotten a job as a registered nurse, and remarried. Her new husband wasn't, however, the man she'd started seeing while living with Jimmy. Rhonda had ended that relationship and the resulting pregnancy.
She had the abortion. I think she had told my sister that she just had miscarried.
But just when it appeared that the case against Rhonda would never see the light of day, the file had landed on the desk of Denton County's new prosecutor, and he had been determined to bring the case to justice.
Jimmy went to high school with my wife. She's the one that got me to try the case.
Rhonda had been equally determined to go to trial, even if her counsel hadn't.
He's trying to get me to plea bargain with him. And I told him, I said, before I'm anything, before I'm a mother, before I'm a wife, I'm a Christian. And I'm not going to walk into a courtroom, put my hand on a Bible, and say that I did something that I didn't do. Even if it means getting off easy, I'm not going to do that.
Proceedings began on March 25th. In his opening statement, prosecutor Carrie Peel painted Rhonda as a cold and conniving woman who deliberately set fire to her own home. But why kill Jimmy? The answer, according to the prosecutor, lay in her crumbling marriage and a bevy of life insurance policies.
She had taken out a series of life insurance policies on Jimmy to where it got to be $1.1 million.
And once Jimmy was dead, prosecutors said Rhonda hadn't waited long to collect.
By 12:25 p.m., Rhonda was already on the phone with an insurance company trying to report Jimmy's death and trying to start the claims process. And Rhonda had called 5 separate insurance companies by 3 p.m. on the day of Jimmy's death.
She called the insurance company while he's probably still smoldering.
Had Jimmy known he was so well insured? According to the prosecution, the answer was no. As evidence, they presented the insurance company's own findings. At least one of the final policies taken out on Jimmy was forged.
An insurance investigator asked us to look at a policy that my son's name had been signed to, and he wanted to compare it to my son's signature. That definitely was not my son's signature.
On cross, however, Rhonda's defense attorney reminded jurors that Jimmy had suffered from a disability. Could that not explain the suspicious signature?
At times, because of his difficulty, James did not write well, and his writing was not legible half the time. So I signed tons of things for my husband.
But it wasn't a pen that prosecutors were trying to place in Rhonda's hands. It was a match. And on March 26th, prosecutors called on the man they were counting on for a conviction, arson expert Ray Powell. Seated at the witness stand, Powell described how the charred remains at the Orr's home indicated that someone had set at least 2 fires in Jimmy's bedroom.
We took 8 by 10 photographs. We held it up for the jury to see. We explained the patterns on the photograph.
There was, in fact, a second fire that had been set, first the door and then the window.
Jimmy had been trapped. Rhonda, the prosecution argued, hadn't just cut off all the room's exits, she'd also set out to destroy her husband's means of escape.
The wheelchair was actually melted. Aluminum melts at 1,200 degrees. To have 1,200 degree fire at the floor level indicated to us that that may have very well been where she actually initiated the fire.
Powell's findings were a searing indictment against Rhonda. But were they accurate? After all, as the defense pointed out during cross-examination, months had passed before Powell ever set foot on the crime scene.
The witness called by the prosecution was not on the fire scene till 5 or 6 months after the fire and didn't have the benefit of knowing what the room actually looked like because it had been so disturbed by excavation efforts.
Convicting Rhonda, according to the defense, required jurors to believe that 6 months after the fatal fire, one expert could find evidence of arson. Not only that, it required that they disregard the opinions of other experts who did examine the fire immediately after the incident.
The fire examiner who was hired by the insurance company the day after the fire did not find multiple points of fire.
And when it was the defense's turn to present their case, they promptly called the insurance investigator Mike Keller to the stand. On March 28th, he testified that not only had he failed to find any evidence of multiple fires, he argued that there were no grounds to charge Rhonda or anyone with arson.
He said, he was in fact very emphatically clear that you cannot establish arson as a cause of this fire.
To ram the point home, Rhonda's attorney made clear to the jury that Keller wasn't just some expert brought in by the defense. The insurance company had hired him to look out for their interests, not Rhonda's.
An insurance company, they don't have to pay if a homeowner does something to their own home. They benefit from me being found guilty, yet their arson investigator is testifying for me, saying it's not arson.
It would be up to the jurors to decide which expert they believe. But before they broke for deliberations, lead prosecutor Carrie Peel made sure they didn't forget how Jimmy had spent his final moments trying to escape.
Got down on the floor and kicked and writhed on the floor like a snake.
It was an emotion-packed recreation of Jimmy's fiery final moments.
He's rolling around on the floor, flopping like, a frog on a hot pavement.
When Carrie Peel made his argument, I just wanted to stand up and clap when he got done.
But when the trial broke for deliberations on March 31st, everyone wondered which would impress the jury more: the scientific evidence offered by the defense or the prosecution's emotional appeal. Coming up, the verdict is revealed.
It was almost as if it was a dream.
On March 31st, 2008, Rhonda Orr sat at the defendant's table in the Denton County Courthouse. Accused of intentionally setting a house fire that killed her disabled husband, the 34-year-old widow and mother was awaiting the verdict in her felony arson trial. The jury had just broken for deliberations, and as the clock ticked by, Rhonda was quietly confident.
I knew that we had won. How could the jury have found me guilty? It didn't make sense to me.
A mere 2 hours after it had begun deliberations, the jury announced it had reached a decision.
We were surprised how quickly they came back, and several people said, well, this must be good.
Moments later in the crowded courtroom, the judge read the jury's verdict aloud. Guilty.
My head felt hot. I remember a sense of shock. I didn't know. It was almost as if it wasn't real. It was almost as if it was a dream.
But if Rhonda was shaken by the verdict, she never showed it, according to the prosecutor.
You never blinked.
Following the verdict, the jury handed down Rhonda's sentence: 88 years in prison. Jimmy's friends and family were elated.
I think that's fair because now she's going to lose what a lot of people consider the best years of your life. She's going to have to spend those in prison thinking about what she did.
Rhonda's first thought